Children of helicopter parents, what was the worst or most embarrassing thing they put you through? I was on leave from Iraq, turned 21 during that time period, and my parents still made me be home by midnight. I was a goddamn combat veteran and I needed to be home by midnight, lol. Holy crap, yes. I was home on leave after my Afghanistan deployment, also 21, decided against my better judgment to stay at my parents' instead of a hotel. First night back I was out late getting fricked up with some old friends from high school, and at 9 my dad started blowing up my phone telling me to get home. I just told him that home was Fort Huachuca, AZ, and I was on vacation. One time I went to the mall with my friends, which was very rare because I didn't often get to have friends. Obviously to get there my parents had to drop me off, so they drove away, but then an hour into our hangout session, which consisted of walking around the mall and me telling her jokes, it was fun, my mom texts me and asks where I am. I text her back and tell her I'm at the mall, where she dropped me off. She accused me of leaving and demanded I take a picture of where I am to prove I'm still there. Reluctantly I did, confiding in my date about my narcissistic mother for the first time to anyone. Telling someone about it felt good, until 5 minutes later she used a picture I sent her to find where I was and approach me. This is when I discovered she never actually went home and was following me around the mall the whole time, watching what I was doing. She told me wrong had to leave right now because she was worried I'd run away and grabbed me by my arm to take me away, leaving my date there. This isn't the only time she embarrassed me. Among others, she called a good friend of mine's parents to tell them he was doing drugs. He wasn't, so I wouldn't ask to go over to see him. I want you to prove to me that you're not lying, even though I can see with my own eyes that you're telling the truth. And now I'm going to embarrass you and drag you away for acting strange, even though you haven't done that either. WTF. My parents had this freaking tracking device activated in my cell phone. All throughout high school they knew exactly where I was. That is, until I'd leave the dang thing at the place where I told them I was going and go off wherever I wanted. They were the very definition of helicopter parents. My mother once drove to my workplace after school when I was 17 to check and make sure I was actually working. She then freaked out at me when I got home because she claimed I wasn't there, when really she just didn't drive all the way in the parking lot to avoid being seen since she drives such a distinct car. That was around her phase of thinking I was on hardcore drugs and sleeping with the entire male population of my town. I was an A+ student who worked every day after school plus weekends. Don't know when she thought I'd have time for all of that. I've been through that phase. My favorite example is the one day my dad went to my room and screamed at me, telling me to give him the drugs and come clean because he smelled that I was smoking. I was watching a movie and eating pizza rolls. I was a fatty. The neighbor's house was on fire. Not the most embarrassing thing, but the only one I feel okay sharing. She would constantly go through my phone and read everything when I wasn't around, and I'd find out when she brought up embarrassing information in front of friends, family, a crush. Once she found my crush on Facebook and messaged him a long butt message that I don't even want to know what it said. All I know is that he was super uncomfortable when he asked me if I knew she had contacted him. As for the worst part about it, I never felt a sense of freedom. I always felt watched. I was never a bad kid, but I felt violated every day and night. I felt like I never had my own sense of self. My mom did this too. She would read texts I sent to my boyfriend out loud to my family. I know what you mean about never having a sense of freedom. I was always treated like I had done something wrong even though I was generally a very well-behaved kid. My parents called my trade school when I was freaking 19 years old to make sure I was attending. They didn't have a reason to suspect I wasn't going and they weren't the ones paying for it. I moved out very soon after. This wasn't the worst, but it was one of the last. Monitored my internet activity and brought up the P I watched at the dinner table in front of my younger siblings and a friend who was over for dinner, and told me watching P would leave me morally depraved and difficult for anyone to love. I was 13. Don't watch it at the dinner table, mate. One of the more memorable experiences. When I was a freshman, my cousin was a senior and through him, I made a lot of friends that were upperclassmen. So at the end of the year, I got invited to go to prom. My parents made my date, who was just a friend, come over 2 weeks before prom and basically asked him every question imaginable. They got his phone number, home number, email, the works. He was super chill about it because my cousin had warned him beforehand. When prom actually came around, I wasn't allowed to ride in the limo with everyone else. Instead, my mom drove me in her ugly butt Astro van that looked like the Mystery Machine, and she had my siblings and cousins packed in there. When we got to the venue, she got off with me and asked an administrator if she could stay. Thank God he said no. Oh, and I had a curfew. 8:30 p.m. It was 7 when I got there. Ugh. For everyone saying I would have been violated, my friend is gay and my parents were well aware. The Astro van was handed down to me after I graduated, and I loved it until the end. Your mom clearly thinks she is on a permanent escort mission. I have loved to write since I was very young. My mom had this weird obsession with going through my stuff, and one day, while I was going through her stuff, I found a crap ton of my writings. She read all my stuff and saved it. I felt incredibly violated. I threw everything away, which I deeply regret because I would have loved to read about my teen angst now that I'm going through my late 20s angst. Ugh. Yes, my mom was super bad about this. She'd go through my writing notebooks and journals and lecture me about the things that I wrote. I still have a bit of a complex where I won't let people read my writing because of it. One night I decided to visit my boyfriend at his apartment for some TV time and cuddles. I ended up restarting my phone and forgetting the turning it back on part. While cuddling in front of the television, I fall asleep. At around midnight, my mom calls and it goes straight to voicemail. Any logical person would just figure the phone died or just didn't have service. Very reasonable where I live. Not my mother. She called the cops and tried to report me missing, which ended with the police asking how long I had been gone. She responded with about 8 hours and they tell her to wait until morning. At this point it is about 1 AM and I am still asleep. We both are. Fast forward about 2 hours and my mother has called and woken up all of my friends hunting for me with no luck. She calls my best friend and she tells her that I am at my boyfriend's apartment. My mother now knows that I am safe and not missing. This is not enough for her though. She ends up coming to the apartment after pestering best friend enough for the location. My best friend doesn't know the exact apartment, so she just told her the complex name and went back to bed. I woke up at almost 4 in the morning to my mother banging on the door yelling persona blah anxious. Open the freaking door. I run thinking something is wrong and fling open the door to find her red, metaphorical steam is pouring from her ears. She yells for me to get in my truck and get home now. The next day when I went to visit my boyfriend and apologized profusely for what my mother has done, I discover that my mom had banged on every single door until she found the right one. I was 18 at the time. It didn't take much longer before my relationship ended. This is one of very many stories. Finn. My parents weren't helicopter parents, I said. It was mainly my dad who was really strict only about movies. For example, when I was in high school, I asked if I could go to the movies with my friends. It was a G.I. Joe movie that I wasn't super into, but it was mainly to just do something fun. My dad said he wouldn't let me go unless I wrote a paper on the movie after I watched it about its redeeming qualities and Christian principles. G.I. Joe is a bad motherfucker. Praise Jesus. Mum read in my diary that I had lost my virginity to my BF of the time X. She called my school's principal to tell him that X had violated me. I am still a teenager, so I'm still putting up with my parents' helicopter habits. My parents were furious when they found out I had watched The Hunger Games at a friend's house. Same thing happens whenever I watch a movie rated PG or above and they're not there to fast forward through the kissing scenes and mild cursing. They don't allow me to spend money without telling them first. I once bought a pack of gum without telling them. It wasn't pretty. Long story short, I got my phone taken away for a week after being chewed out for a solid hour. My dad has software on my phone that tells him whatever I do on the internet. This includes texting and calling. He'll probably see this, but I don't care. I'd better stop typing now. They might catch me. My dad has software on my phone that tells him whatever I do on the internet. This includes texting and calling. He'll probably see this, but I don't care. I just remembered my parents installed one of those on my last phone. It still works on Wi-Fi, so I use it for P and music. I should probably delete that before I traumatize my parents. Most of my childhood is a fog, but I have memories of being in and out of doctors' offices all the time growing up. They often had me on multiple prescriptions. The doctors never really spoke to me. They'd speak to my parents and then I would take whatever pills or undergo whatever treatment I was instructed. This continued until I was 18. I still to this day have never been told what was up, and I have no access to early medical records. I'm 39 now and perfectly healthy with no ailments or health conditions that I am aware of. I do not remember any names of any doctors. We moved around a lot, and this was the 80s and 90s in the US, so I don't think the medical records are centralized in any way. I wouldn't know where to begin tracking them down. I don't ask my parents about it, partly because it seems pointless without being able to verify their answers, but mostly because I just have no desire to revisit that part of my past. Would rather just focus on being a happy and healthy adult who lives far away from the rest of his family. If you remember the name of any of the offices, you can call and ask for your medical records. Not me, but my student. I'm an academic advisor at a university. Met with a student who has 2 quarters left. Helped him apply to graduate in June. Got an email from his mom 2 hours later, asking about why he's got an issue. He's at least 21. Depriving me of internet. In grade 9, I was only allowed to use my laptop in the kitchen to do my homework. My parents blocked Facebook, but I found websites that helped me use Facebook chat. In grade 10, I was allowed to take my laptop to my room, but my dad turned my internet on and off every other hour from 8 in the morning until midnight, at which point it shut off for the night. It was ridiculous because I could never sit down long enough to get any work done before the internet was gone and I had to wait for the next hour. My dad found out about the chat sites I used as a workaround for Facebook and blocked those. I resorted to using Bing Bar's Facebook chat function, which was slow and glitchy. In grade 11 and 12, my internet was shut off at 1 in the morning and parental controls were removed. I went crazy and watched Netflix and talked to people all the time, which obviously had a negative toll on my grades. TLDR. My parents made me use Bing. That's just cruel. Nobody should have to use Bing. Except for P apparently. Okay Reddit. I'll tell you why I left home at 15 with nothing but a backpack. My 2 siblings and I moved in with my dad in 2010, and he hadn't played much of a role in any of our lives since we were young, so we didn't know what to expect, certainly not what was to come. We learned that my dad would entertain my stepmother's crazy behaviors and thoughts, although he is an otherwise easy to handle guy. In the 6 months I lived with them, my stepmom became more and more paranoid. The early morning runs I enjoyed before school were no longer allowed because she thought I might be meeting boys along the way. The Panadol tablet she found on my floor with a little indented P must have been ecstasy, so she removed all my belongings, school books, clothes, toiletries. I didn't own anything else, and locked them in her own room. I had to redo 2 assignments lost during this debacle. She would want me accessible at all times via phone, since I walked to high school with my younger brother, but refused to pay for any of the costs despite me having no job. 3 of my girlfriends were meant to come over for movies and lunch for my birthday, but when none turned up, I suspected she had something to do with it. That was an awful feeling. One night I was having quite a deep chat with my father and she barges in to interrupt as usual, but I stand up for myself and tell her we're talking. Please leave us alone. As soon as she lay a hand on me, I grabbed my bag and ran out the door and never looked back. She also needed every chore done to her specific schedule. My sister was called into her 12-hour work shift and couldn't do the vacuuming until she got back home. So, she was kicked out and lived with me the next year. My brother joined us not long after. Funnily enough, this all brought us 3 so much closer together against a common enemy. I'll never again underestimate the potency of siblinghood. When it's needed, they've provided me a better family than my parents could. I wasn't allowed to have friends. My parents lived out of district and lied to the schools claiming that we lived at my grandma's house. They are extremely paranoid as it is, so of course, I couldn't have friends. And I really mean I couldn't. I couldn't hang out with anyone outside of school, ever. It made me a loner. I moved out when I was 17 after I got a job and I couldn't handle my dad taking all of my paycheck each week. My dad was also physically and emotionally abusive. He told me every day that I was fat and I could never be as good of a kid as my brothers were. I could go on forever on how they practically locked me away from life. Anyhow, I am now extremely socially awkward. I get panic attacks often when it comes to hanging out with people. My husband has to give me pep talks to get me out. I'm just now becoming comfortable with his friends and family. We've been together for 2 years. But hey, at least I found an amazing guy. I was in the school musical. It was my first lead role and I was singing a duet with the cutest boy in school. True, I was playing his mom, but this was my moment. A showmax was sure to follow. Then the fire alarm went off. The stage manager signaled to us that it was just the fog machine and to keep going. So we did. Cute guy started to get nervous, so I grabbed his hand to give him strength. Imagine Tina Belcher grabbing a zombie Jimmy Pesto Jr.'s butt and you'll have a pretty good idea as to how big a deal this was for me. The audience, of course, is awkwardly leaving because, you know, the fire alarm is going off. Just then, I see a blurry shape out of the corner of my eye. Someone is running towards me. It's a woman. She's screaming. It's my mother. She runs up to me on the stage, rips me away from Jimmy Jr.'s arms and screams into my face microphone. What are you doing? There's a fire. Get these kids out of here. WHO the frick is in charge here. I was shunned for weeks and 12 years later my drama teacher still tells the story to his students. Then there was the time she called my boss and told him I needed a midday nap because I was too tired. I was 22. Yes, ignoring fire alarms is bad, as is putting teenagers in charge in adult situations. I'm an adult and an educator now, and when the fire alarm goes off on stage, and it does, I very calmly gather my students and we go outside. No sprinting, running or shaking is involved. 16-year-old me, however, was devastated. This isn't as bad as I was expecting. I thought the twist was going to be that the mom had pulled the fire alarm to interrupt a kissing scene in the play or something. I had a roommate whose parents would call me all the time if he slipped up and didn't call them up that day or something. And they'd call me before they tried contacting him usually. Maybe to find chinks in the alibi armor, I dunno. I think he gave them my number for emergencies. Because we were in a college in a different country. But it was used for everything but that. A typical conversation would go like this. Hi, where's ASD? I don't know. We both left for college in the morning. I'm going to a class now. You don't know where he is? Why? He's in different classes. I'll only see him in the evening. Please look for him. Now. He hasn't called up since day before yesterday. At which point I would agree and go back to whatever I'd be doing after informing my roommate on his phone the number to which his parents have. Up until I left for college my bedtime was 9 every night. I wasn't supposed to be on the phone past 8:30. I wasn't allowed to go outside by myself. Couldn't have friends over after 7. Couldn't go to a boy's house until the summer after high school. I had to show my parents my grades every semester to show I was successful. I rode the bus until my senior year because he wouldn't take me to get my license until I was 17. He pretty much told me I had to attend a certain college because it was X amount of time away from home. While I'm in college, he makes me show him my grades, check in once a week with 3 different family members, and makes me move home every summer. Now that I'm applying for master's programs and trying to move away, every conversation ends with an argument about me moving away and trying to start my own life. My parents were divorced and when my mom died I moved in with my dad and his girlfriend at the age of 10. The first time I told him no he tried to hit me with a belt. He's been paying for my college out of the benefits I received from my mother, which I didn't even know about until a brother from my mom's side told me about them. My dad became enraged when I found out about the money, and he cut off communication with that side of the family. Showing grades is totally normal, until a surprise visit campus trying to fact check, or when my then boyfriend hung himself and my grades dropped. He told me I was too stupid for college and wasting his money and needed to drop out. Him and his GF worked all of the time, so I went to a babysitter until I was a sophomore on high school. I feel like I don't have the ability to make friends now because my social interactions were really limited due to some of his rules. I didn't really know how to have relationship with men growing up. I just did whatever would make them happy and not get upset with me. I don't really know how to do a lot of life things myself, and my boyfriend is slowly teaching me. Thank God. When I was a sophomore in college, I stayed the night at my then boyfriend's house, and my dad told me I must have just spent the last year in school sleeping around and no one would want me because of it. I live with my now boyfriend, and it's the longest relationship I've ever been in, and he's helping me move away. I was accepted to a master's program in Canada and one in my home state, and I'm terrified to leave, so I'm going to the in-state one. It's farther away than now, so I see it as a baby step. No one in our family lives outside an hour drive from each other. I'm the first to go to college and actually finish, and I'm going to get away. When I was in 4th grade, I started a journal. I kept it all the way up until my junior year. I would write about my experiences with guys. Nothing unusual for a hormonal teenage chick. Well, somehow my parents always found out about things I would do, like hooking up or making out with guys. They would always tell me they found out by hearing it from a friend who saw. Turns out they were reading my journal the entire time. In hindsight, it was painfully obvious that I was being stupid to write down all my private experiences, but it was still a huge invasion of privacy that significantly worsened the trust issues I already had from other crap they did. My parents are Mormon. I had to clear everything through them. Everything became a pros and cons family debate that ended in WWJD, which was nothing fun apparently. Anytime I did anything unapproved, I was guilt-tripped and shamed. They had to know where I was at all times. If I didn't answer my phone when they called, I was in deep crap. One time they let me go night fishing for catfish with a buddy, then got pee when I rolled home around 4 AM. I got grounded for a month on that one. I wasn't allowed to date even casually. God forbid I even be friends with a girl. To this day I am still painfully awkward around girls. I never learned how to interact with them in anything but a professional capacity. They had my whole life planned out for me. Graduate high school, go on mission, go to bio, marry nice Mormon girl, have children, repeat brainwashing cycle. My junior year of high school they made a mistake. They let me join FFA, Future Farmers of America. That's right, laugh, but one of the most hands-on, educational organizations I've had the pleasure of interacting with. I digress. It was there that I met people that didn't need a god to give meaning to life. It was at this point I hatched a plot to keep my life from being railroaded. I began siphoning off the money I was supposedly giving God as tithing from my pittance of a paycheck from a part-time job. Up until I was 18 I stashed it in a paint can in the crawl space. Then I opened my own bank account and began funneling it there, paying my tithing out of my parent-controlled bank account in cash because I conveniently misplaced my checkbook. Then in my senior year, I borrowed the necessary personal information from my parents and began applying to universities. I got accepted to school and kept a lid on it until a week before school started, and I had a fight with my parents and told them I was leaving. I left home. I made a lot of mistakes as I blundered into the unknown as a shy and naive fool. There are some things I wish I could change. But 6 years later here I am free of religious control and am alive and kicking to tell about it. If anyone wants advice on breaking from the church or wants to share your story, feel free to PM me. Sorry for the length. For some reason felt like sharing. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.